What would Thomas Aquinas say if he was your financial advisor? Find out today on the Catholic Money Show. Welcome to the Catholic Money Show, where we put faith and finance together for your everyday financial decisions so that you can live a fully Catholic life. Today is an episode I've been looking forward to. A good friend of mine reached out a little while ago. We were talking about something, and then he just kind of brought up some ideas that we are going to talk about later today. I thought that could be good. That could be a good episode for the podcast. So I'm happy to welcome to the show here, of course, as you heard at the top of the episode, to talk about Thomas Aquinas, this friar from centuries ago, but I think he's got a lot to say about how we use our money today. So please welcome to the show. He is a certified financial planner, certified exit planner. So if people like selling their businesses, he's coming in here from Florida. He's got 3 kids. He is a good friend of me and Amanda and my former roommate. Please welcome to the show, Chris Schilmoeller. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Happy to be here.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
What was that?
It's the Catholic Money Show, so I'm happy to be here.
That's right, baby. So he brought up this idea of
the Catholic Money Show, so exciting.
Of Thomas Aquinas and what he has to tell us here today. But I say we get people coming in, talking to us about their money, looking at their budgets, all of that. You see people with their money, right, coming to you as a financial planner. I guess before maybe as our way in to talking about St. Thomas, just what's your view on things? What do you see in the life of folks as they're coming in and at least pulling back part of the page on their financial lives?
Yeah, I think in general, our kind of modern sensibilities lead us to be very disintegrated in life in general. I think we see this in the church in general. When you see research coming out about what Catholics believe about the Catholic Church or how they vote or different things like that. When it comes to the finance side, I see it as pretty disjointed as well. I think, like I said, it's a modern thing, but I think it's a challenge for Catholics as well. And when people come to me, a lot of times our first meetings, I notice a few things, particularly, and I think we can kind of go off these 3 things because I think they relate to the topic in general. But I find that there's a disorder to their finances in general. And what that looks like is they have accounts in all these different places and they don't even know where they all are. And they'll bring in a statement from something. And I say, how do you have this? You have an annuity and you're 30 years old. Why do you have an annuity? It's like, I don't know. My cousin cornered me at Christmas and he just started working for Northwestern Mutual and he told me I had to do this, but so it's not integrated. It's not working together. There's kind of disorder to it. The second thing is I find that folks add too much value on the quantitative side and not enough value to the qualitative side. And I think there's a lot to that. We can unpack that a little bit, but just the fact that my bank account says I have a lot of money, that means I'm good or I'm set or I have value or worth or success. And I find it hard to get and I tell my clients when we're doing planning, we're going to obviously talk about the quantitative side of it. That's the easy part to talk about. But if you're going to actually have a good plan, you need to talk about the qualitative side as well. What are your values? What are you going to do when you retire? How are you going to use your money? All these different things. So I find that challenging and confusing to talk about. And then the third piece is that and it kind of flows from the second piece, is that what are your goals? Like, what are you going to do? It's not solid goals that making money is tied to. So it feels more like money is just the purpose. I'm doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's easy to see. I mean, in going through some of my parents' finances over the last year after my dad passed away, and they were, I wouldn't say disordered, but there was a lot going on. And I'm sure it made sense the way my dad thought and the way he had things set up. But man, it was a lot of moving pieces, stuff all over the place, different types of things. It's like, I can kind of see why he made some of these decisions, but I'm still like, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And yeah, just trying to figure that out and get in one, not necessarily you need to be in, only one financial institution for absolutely everything. But have a plan, have a reason for what you're doing there. I am very interested in what you said about putting too much value on the quantity versus the quality. Let's pop in there for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I know, and this is something I was reading some of the things you'd mentioned ahead of time from St. Thomas. And he's not somebody I read a lot, I will admit. It got a little thick at some places. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I know he's saying something here. So this might be getting us into a little bit of that territory, but I think maybe there's a lot in that word value that maybe we need to unpack even before we look at quantitative and qualitative when it comes to our money. So I guess how would you or St. Thomas talk about quality or value?
I was going to say maybe even introduce why Thomas in general.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Why we even invited him to this party? Why is he in this conversation?
So Thomas is one of the doctors of the church. He's called the common doctor or the universal doctor because his work touches all different facets of theology and life in general. Another name that has come up for him from John Paul II called him like the doctor of humanity, because John Paul II said he understands humanity so much, which is kind of hard to see if you actually just go in and just start reading any of his writings. Like, what are you talking about? I almost make an analogy of if you've ever been to the Vatican Museum, you walk in, and if you don't have a guide, it is just like overwhelming. There's so much there. You don't know where you're going. It's super crowded. There's all these Greek statues everywhere. It's like, what is happening here? I know it's beautiful. I know I should appreciate this, but I don't have any guide or anybody to show me like what is actually happening. It's similar to reading Thomas. I think it's like you have to do a lot of research and understand what he's talking about and why he's doing it. But even recent popes like John Paul II and Leo the 13th had a big thing in terms of encyclical called Aeterni Patris, just talking about how he is just a central figure in the intellectual life of the church. What he's done in his brilliance is being able to summarize everything that came before him. And today's the feast of St. Augustine, and he is such a student of Augustine, scripture, even Aristotle and Greek philosophers, that you are going to be able to read and understand those people better by reading and understanding Aquinas. So he summarized everything that went before him. And he was in this really interesting time of history where Aristotle was becoming more prevalent. They discovered some of his works that had been lost for a while. So he's interpreting these and he's bringing them into the faith as well, which helps us understand different ideas that are challenging in theology. But then he sets up the foundation for the church to move after him. So, for example, like the Council of Trent, there were three main sources that they were looking at while they were deliberating the Council of Trent. It was scripture, I think it was like papal writings, and the Summa. So even today, our most recent catechism, he's one of the most cited people in the catechism in general. So it's just interesting time in history. His genius was ordering and summarizing and taking different sides of arguments and showing how the truth a lot of times is in the middle.
Yeah. On that point of him being all over the place in the church, we just did a series on Rerum Novarum, Pope Leo the 13th's encyclicals, and my favorite paragraph, number 22, I'd say a third of it probably is just quotes from Thomas Aquinas, which is, he's a name you hear a lot, even if you don't read maybe his work, the Summa or whatever, you've probably run into some of the things he's written, whether it's in the catechism or in encyclicals or anything else that you might read in the church. And so, lots of insights. And this is, I'm sure, unfair to Thomas, but I was thinking about how he, even this little bit that I read today, which we'll get into here in a little bit, but as this person said, or as Augustine says, or as this philosopher or whatever. He's pulling out all these people all the time and what they've said, right? Kind of bringing all that knowledge together and figuring out how it can fit together and all that, and presenting that, as well as some thoughts that he's got.
Well, it's like, because he didn't have AI. He didn't have
the centuries old human AI who took all this input and then can pick out all the appropriate, connecting pieces and then present it to you. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
what he did, right? He did the Summa, and then did a gospel commentary like this, where it's just, however many dozen other people, and he just like slots all the things that they've said all together, so you don't have to read 36 commentaries. You just look at the one, and it's like all these church fathers essentially having like a discussion with themselves over the passage you're reading. So yeah, it's
amazing.
AI before there was.
So yeah, reading him gives you again exposure to the fathers of the church, doctors of the church, also philosophers, and his just knowledge of scripture is amazing. It's almost like a Bible study when you're reading through that. And I should also say, I'm not like a Thomistic scholar or anything like that. I'm just a guy that likes to learn, like to be Catholic. My mind kind of works like similar to like an engineer with like machines and things. I remember working with Focus, which is how we met, with engineers, and you go into like their dorm room and there's just like all these mutilated machines everywhere that they take apart. Yeah, I'll tell you, it's kind of like living with you for a time, Jonathan. I mean, I remember we had to do that.
Oh, there was stuff everywhere.
Yeah, but just like taking things apart, seeing how it works inside things. My mind kind of works doing that with ideas and intellectual things. The church says this. Well, how did it come to that? Why does it say that? And what is like the intellectual or the lineage of ideas that got us to this point? So I think that's interesting. We also, when we were in New York together, we were at a Dominican parish. So that was my into, the Dominican kind of spirituality and intellectual side of things. So just kind of taking that and keeping in touch with some of the Dominican friars has been helpful as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's a wise move to look to Thomas, since he wrote about so much, synthesized so much, and assembled some of the foundation stones on which so many others who've come after him have built on top of. So yeah, let's look at that idea of value and the quantity and the quality that we see with our money.
Sounds great.
So I guess how would you, whether it's just you and your thinking or pulling on anything from Thomas, how do you see value, and how do you think that compares? Maybe it lines up 1-to-1, maybe it's totally different, maybe it's shades of each. How does maybe a true idea or understanding of value line up with kind of the default in today's world?
Sure. So, I mean, value, especially when it comes to money, can be really confusing, because I think money in general is a confusing thing. One, because it's just an abstract thing. It's not, and even today, we don't have bills anymore. It's all just a number that I can pull up and look at in my bank account or in my investment account, and it changes every day. And the only way that we see what it does for us is how we can use it. But so from that idea of being abstraction, I think it becomes very confusing. And I think even as Catholics, it's kind of confusing to think about money, because we see our Lord making really strong statements about money, strong warnings. We hear saints' writings about money and hear stories about how they give up wealth and inheritances and everything. We might in a homily hear about how we need to be detached. But then the next week, it's the big parish fundraiser, and we need you to have money, and we need to support you, or we need you to support us. And you see like, wealthy people, their names are on buildings and they're recognized for their generosity and everything. So it can be confusing. Like, is money good? Should I have this? Should I not have it? So coming into like, where is the value? Where does it fit in my life? Should I say no to it? Should I say yes to it? Should I embrace it? And it's a confusing thing. And I think when it comes to finding the mean, or like the place in between the extremes of rejecting it versus like completely embracing it and being covetous, as what Thomas would say, is being able to be detached from it, but understanding what it is, where it fits in the hierarchy of things in order. So it's an instrumental bit, which means that it has some value, but a limited value. And there are other things that have more value. And if you're using it for an instrumental purpose, you can use it for those things that have more value to them. So for example, if I have a little bit of money, I don't have to work all the time. I can spend time with my family. I can pray and go to mass and have a little bit more leisure in my life. So it can be a means to adding value, but it's not the value itself. It doesn't hold that value in the sense of what Thomas would call an end in itself. So it's a means to that. And it can be a great thing as well as for generosity. So again, value comes in relationships, my true meaning, my true purpose, made in the image and likeness of God, all these different things, then helping myself and my family to pursue God, helping other people, whether it's spiritual or temporal, being generous. So you can use it to add value, but the value isn't that. And I think what the challenge is, again, with the abstraction, with our utilitarian mindset in our culture, and everything economics in our culture is utilitarian. It's built on materialism. More is better, which confuses us because we do a lot with money. I work all day so I can have money. Then my wife and I talk or fight about what we're going to do with the money. And then my kids are always asking. Money is a big part of our life. And it's hard to sometimes put it in its proper place, but our culture doesn't help either. So it's built on a utilitarian, more is better. If a company is not doing well, they're just going to fire people just so that their stock can go up. All these different things is based on that. So it's hard to get away from the mindset that if I have a high net worth, if I make a lot of money, that means that equals value on me. That means that I have worth. That means I have success. That means I have power or security. And with this kind of abstraction, it can almost lead to money mimicking our desire for God. Because, and Thomas says this, and we can get into this, that money has an element of an infinite. So I can keep making more money every year. I can keep adding more money to my bank account. It feels like it never ends. And for Thomas, for something to be good or valuable, it has to have an end to it. And for it to be worthy of our pursuing. And God, in a sense, is that end, even though he's infinite. So money can confuse us in the sense of almost being an idol or feeling that need that we know we have for infinite and unending, fixing it on the wrong thing. So again, going back to the qualitative thing, when I have God, that should give me a sense of peace, security, all these things in the right way, a sense of power just to do the right thing. Pope Benedict was saying this. I don't remember what he said. It was after the financial crisis in like 2008. He was talking about these ideas with money and being confused and using it in a utilitarian way, saying we are living, if you're doing that, you are living in an untruth. And then I heard reading a Catholic economist, kind of commenting on that. He said, it's basically you're living a practical atheism. If that idea of value is so tied to money itself and the quantitative side of it, if you think about it, if I put that much on it, I'm living for that, for the material, for the utilitarian, which is practically like atheism in practice.
Yeah, and seeing our net worth as our self-worth is a huge mistake, but one that is encouraged by our society, the world's worldview that we are kind of steeped in these days, and to move beyond that, to see beyond that and see, money is a tool, right? It's, as I was reading, it was, I don't know the words, and maybe even the translations end up using slightly different terms, but it was St. Thomas was talking about how there are, and I don't have it in front of me, but these like fundamental or like human goods, like these necessary goods, things like food and clothing and shelter, transportation, even, like these are things that help us stay alive. Why do we need these things? Because if I don't eat, I'm going to die. So it's like a very like fundamental need or desire or good. And then there are these abstract ones, these ones beyond it, which money is one of them, right? It's, well, why do you want money? Well, because then I can buy the food that I can eat so I don't starve, or I can get the car so I can go to places and do things, or I can buy the house and then not freeze to death or whatever it is. It's this removal was a step removed, at least, from like our true material, at least, needs.
He breaks it down in this section between the exterior goods of the body, and goods of the soul. He kind of takes that from Aristotle. And it's really interesting because it comes at this point in the Summa after he's talked about God, he's talked about creation, he's talked about the creation of man, angels, and things like that. And then he gets practical on humanity in general, what it means to live human life, and ethically, all these things like that. He starts with happiness, and he starts with the idea of the end, which is the goal. And without understanding what a thing is for, you can't really understand it. So he starts with that. But then he goes into the exterior goods of the body, goods of the soul. An interesting thing about this is also like he's taking everything from, so like I said, Aristotle kind of puts the goods like that and organizes them in that way. But Christ also does that as well in the Beatitudes, because he starts with blessed are the poor. And he starts with the exterior, then goes to the interior, which are things like, so in general, things like health, even pleasure, things like that. And then the goods of the soul would be like virtue and contemplation. And that's where they build off of each other. And the exterior goods are for the interior goods, and the interior goods are for the goods of the soul. So again, he's organizing everything, and that's part of his brilliance. And that's where we sometimes struggle today, is how do we order all these different things in the right way, which then leads us to act prudently if we could think through that properly.
Yeah. The end is to be with God. And so that's where the happiness lies. At least is how I understood what he was writing, what I could understand. That's the happiness when he goes through, okay, well, is happiness in, pleasure? Is happiness in power? Is happiness in this and this and this and this? And one of them is money. I think it might be maybe the first one that he kind of found. Very for a lot of folks go there first.
Yeah. He has meaning and intentionality behind everything he does. So yeah, he chose wealth or money to be the first mistake that people make when it comes to happiness. So the interesting thing, and the reason why it's a great place to start, and he says this, and Augustine said this, Aristotle said this, is that one thing that everybody agrees on, it's actually really amazing. Like, you can't find things that people agree on. One thing that everybody agrees on is that they desire to be happy. Everything they do is to pursue happiness in some way. All my clients that I see, why are you saving? Why are you making money? I want to be happy. I mean, that's like a standard answer. But where people disagree is, how do you get there? What is happiness? What do you do to be happy? That's where the disagreement is. And that's where he's trying to go into in his treatise on happiness. What is it?
Yeah.
You start with money. Yeah.
Yeah. How do we properly understand or even use our money to move us towards that true happiness instead of letting it get in the way?
Yeah. So I think at first it's understanding what it is and the challenges with it. And like I said, the idea that it can be confusing to us, and the fact that we are, even in our culture today, but it was obviously a problem back then, because he talks about the same thing of our desire to just keep getting more and more and more in pursuing an infinite in something like money. So just that idea and understanding the risk in that and understanding what money is important. And it also helps to make sense of what Christ is saying about money, like why he's making strong sayings about how hard it is for the rich man to go to heaven and different things like that. But it's also balancing out with other things that he says in scripture and different things to not make you scrupulous or afraid of that, because there are other parts where you, from scripture and from saints, that it's like, no, it can be a good thing. So it's understanding the risks, but also understanding the order of where it is. It's an instrumental thing. So it's for, again, it's exterior good. So it's for the goods of the body. So we need to take care of ourselves. And Thomas even goes and says that it's not bad to live in a way that's normal for your particular status in life and everything. You don't have to wear raggedy clothes all the time and all these things. It's like, no, you can fit in. You can act like a normal person, which is almost like a relief, right? It's like, well, I can be detached, but I can still look like a normal person, So, I mean, he even says like, yeah, you can drive he doesn't say this, but it's like, you keep moving along. It's like, yeah, you can drive a car. You don't have to drive like a 20-year-old car that the windshield's cracked and falling and all these different things. Like, you can drive a car that's respectable. You can live in a house that's respectable, because the church has always seen like wealth as, again, an instrument, but it has beauty and it has, like beautiful churches, beautiful, you call it the treasure of the church, like libraries and architecture, and all that's very expensive, but it transfers culture. So thinking about it, like with your family, with my family, we're married, right? So we can have beautiful things in our house. Sometimes maybe they do cost money, but it's transmitting a culture to our children and to our family and to our guests. So you can use it as an instrumental good if you are blessed with, having a job that gives you a little bit extra, but at the same time, you want to be discerning about what do we need, how much is enough, because that's where our culture gets it wrong, is to say it's always better if you have more. So more quantity always equals more quality. So one of the interesting conversations that I think my wife and I challenge some particularly faithful clients is like, all right, so what is that cap that's enough? That if you start hoarding that for yourself, you're actually taking other people's money, because God blesses us with money as is. It's a blessing, right? None of it is ours, if you think about it, but we do need a certain amount of it to live our lives the way that we need to. But there's a certain cap to where that's just other people's money. God blessed us with that so that we can be generous with it. So if I'm taking that, in a sense, I'm like taking somebody else's money that needs that. God gave that to me for those people. And for me, buying a new car, new seat, whatever it is.
Yeah. We use the phrase, which we picked up somewhere else, but of maximum fruitfulness, right? They're just like a plant, a certain amount of water or a chemical in the soil or whatever it is. Like, yes, more of it is going to help that plant thrive and be more fruitful. But at a certain point, you can overwater the plant, or you can have too much nitrogen or phosphorus or whatever it is in the soil, and it will actually hurt the plant, make it not be as fruitful or even die. And the same thing with us and our money. There's a certain amount, yes, that does relieve some suffering, help us meet fundamental needs, get some wants, live that becoming life, take care of those in our charge. And there is an amount where after that, it doesn't help me be a better father or a better husband or anything else. Really, now it's my opportunity to be a better neighbor, a better fellow human, to take care of the needs of others. This is in paragraph 22, Rerum Novarum. I think it's a quote from St. Thomas, but about how when what necessity demands has been satisfied, out of what remains over, give alms. That it is for somebody else now. And the opportunity is now to be like our Father and to be generous and to find those who need it, right? In the antiphon or whatever, Maybe it's used in liturgy hours. I think I've heard it at Mass as one of the antiphons, but it's for pastors. It's like he distributed the food at due time or something like. Okay, yeah, but like that's an important thing, right? We can be conduits to get what others need to those who need them.
No, yeah, exactly. So it's being able to, and he does say that there's a certain level that you reach this threshold that you no longer need that to survive, and you need to be very careful about how you use that. And some of that can strike a little bit of fear in people and scrupulosity. There's some people, money in general, again, is confusing because it's so much of a part of our emotions, like growing up. It's funny talking about me versus my wife. My mom had like a scarcity, and her parents were like, whatever, spend whatever you want. So then I'm like, oh, we can't spend money. I'm going to die if I spend too much money. It's like, nah. So money is so like tied to so many parts of us. But you want to be able to find that middle ground of, God is blessing me, and the good things in life are actually good. And it's an analogy between the good things in life, and that can bring us to an understanding of the good things that are to come, because it is a reflection of God's gifts and also a reflection of goodness in general of God. So it can lead us to that. So we don't need to just deny all good things. We can be there and enjoy them. But the idea of the other side of it is always wanting more. And Thomas says this, is that what we do acquire, we begin to hate and despise, because then we want something else, and it's never ending. So his idea of fulfillment is almost an idea of rest. So our intellect and our will, they rest in truth and goodness. And this pursuit of more and more makes us restless. And Augustine says this, and it's the thing that everybody quotes. And I always laugh because when you actually pick up the Confessions to read, it's like on the first page. So it's like you don't even have to have had to read the book. Really, you just read the first page and you have that, I am restless until I rest in you. I'm pretty sure that's on the first page. But again, we do have a restlessness if we're putting our end in something else. And Thomas also says what we choose as our end is where we are going to pursue and even find our rest, or at least try to find our rest. So the idea of an end is a place of completion and even possession. He talks about happiness as actually a possession. And again, that's why money can be confusing, because we possess, but we're meant to rest and possess the goodness of God.
So let's do it this way to get practical. If Thomas Aquinas was, I'd say, I guess it depends on if he was hired by BuzzFeed to write a listicle, or maybe he's on TikTok and he's making a video with some, like, hey, if you want your money to be a path for you to find actual true happiness, you need to do these X number of things. What do you think would end up on that list?
So he would say you need to have a relationship with God. And know Scripture, know the faith. So it's all about intellect and will for him, right? So that's how we are made in the image and likeness of God. It's intellect and will. Our ability to know and to love. God knows and loves himself, and he does that, and that's how he's kind of a Trinity in a sense. So we also reflect being able to know and love. So again, it's knowing what our faith is and then putting our desires in the right thing so that we can move our will to love the right thing. So it's one, based on knowledge. And then two, I think the idea of leisure in contemplation, which is really hard for us to do, is almost like wasting time doing good things that don't really matter or don't give us that qualitative gain. So prayer, mass, things like that, that's part of it. But time with family.
Sorry, when you said do things that don't give, did you mean a quantitative return?
Yeah, did I say qualitative?
You said qualitative, yeah.
Quantitative return. Yeah. I'm not going to make money.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to use this to gain something else. Mm-hmm. So, that goes into things like the transcendentals and beauty and art and goodness. But it's teaching yourself to slow down and appreciate the values that you actually have, or the qualitative things, the relationships in your life, like the beauty that God has created in the world and in how things work, and even little things like hobbies, and being able to just almost, Christ talks about being childlike, is like enjoying things that you like. So the idea of that also leads to an idea of contemplation. So when it comes to happiness, he distinguishes between imperfect and perfect happiness. And we can only have imperfect happiness here. And that's built based on living virtuous lives, and also living contemplative, or at least to the extent that we can, contemplation. So the leisure can help almost lead us to a slowing down and being more contemplative. So I think he would say those things, as well as just being generous. What ways are you called to give yourself in ways that, or even being open to hearing the Lord telling you to give in ways that might hurt or be unexpected? And yeah, I think those are the things that he would maybe start with.
That's great. Well, if there's somehow a time machine to get that guy a phone, I'd love to see some of those TikToks that he would make.
I would too. Yeah, him and St. Augustine. I mean, they got to be buddies up there right now. You can only imagine Aquinas getting into heaven and Augustine greeting him, and he's like, "You're like my biggest fan. You're my biggest promoter."
Just sitting down, just talking all day long.
Yeah.
That'll be a good thing. Well, thank you for coming on here, for talking to us, and for sharing this. There's a lot out there. I know, in just my very edge knowledge of St. Thomas, I know you wrote the Summa. I know Peter Kreeft has written a Summa of the Summa, and then read a summary of this summary, and then he wrote a summary of that, a shorter Summa. Have you read any of those? Is that a good place to start if people want to, dive a little bit deeper into that? Do you think just go right for the main attraction, or are there other things that maybe you found helpful to kind of warm them up?
Yeah, I have read the Summa of the Summa, and it depends on where you're coming from. It is a good place to start in a sense, but it can also be a challenging place to start, because it is the Summa with a little bit of his commentary on it. So you're actually reading that, and he'll tell you a little bit about what this or that might mean. But if you're starting from scratch, you probably want to start understanding a little bit of some of the language he's using and some of the concepts that are behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ed Thaser has a book. I think it's called maybe like Introduction to St. Thomas, something like that. It's also good to, I think Matt Fradd has something like that too, where it just kind of explains, if you see the word accident, it doesn't mean a car accident. It means something else by that. So some of the words that we're used to hearing, he'll mean something different. It's also good to kind of have a understanding of Aristotle as well, because of so much of what he's using to explain theological terms. He's using words and concepts from Aristotle, and he's quoting them all the time. So Peter Kreeft has a lot of good just introductory philosophy stuff. So I think there's one that's called Philosophy 101. There's one that's called Philosophy, What Every Catholic Should Know, I think. There's one that is called Summa Philosophica. So he just walks through all the different areas of philosophy that are some of the underpinnings of what Thomas is doing. So if you read even just one of those, it's going to make a lot more sense. Again, it's like going into something like the Vatican Museum, which is huge. It's just it's like miles of halls of all kinds of art and beautiful things. But if you don't have a guide, it's like, what am I? It's overwhelming. There's too many people. I don't know what's going on. It's just exhausting. And so some of that will almost be like a little bit of a guide for you to start.
Perfect. Well, thank you for those recommendations. Thank you for sharing everything here today, for coming up here on the Catholic Money Show. Chris, thank you. It was good to see you. I look forward to the next time we get together.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Catholic Money Show.